Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. We're in Volume 6, Chapters 41 through 45. We're going to be completing this book today, and then next class moving into Volume 7, which is titled Breathing Mindfulness Meditation. We'll be doing those 10 chapters in that particular book. Today we're going to start with meditation, and then we're going to move into studying chapters 41 through 45. I'm going to take some time, since we have that in our class today, to open up to any questions that you guys might have just after meditation regarding meditation, because there's tends to be people in this particular class who's either developing their meditation practice or further along in their meditation practice, and you guys might have various questions related to that. So before we get into studying chapters 41 through 45, I'd like to just provide you guys an opportunity to ask any and all questions related to your meditation practice or developing that, and then we'll move into studying chapters 41 through 45. If you'd like to join for the meditation, we start with a brief chant, and if you know those chants, you're welcome to chant along. Then I'm going to provide just a little bit of guidance, and then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet and we'll be meditating together. And then we'll come out of meditation with a chant as well. Keep in mind that these chants don't have anything mystical or magical associated with them. It's not rites or rituals or ceremonies or worship. You're not praying or anything like that. All you're doing is helping to ease the mind into meditation. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly, and invite you to join for meditation. If you'd like to get your body comfortable, where the lower body is nice and comfortable and the hands and arms as well, the upper body should be erect, and then the eyes can just be closed while you're breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. You can hang out here if you'd like, or you're welcome to join along in the chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho วิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, with your eyes closed, just start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then when you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. So wherever you get to the next inhale, just breathe in gradually through the nose, establishing a nice, natural breath. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Just wherever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาคะวาพุทธังมหาคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิ สวากขาโตมหาควตาธัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาควโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. As I mentioned, I'm going to open up to questions that you guys might have related to meditation or really anything that you guys would like to ask questions about. I thought I'd do that here at the beginning before we move into studying today's chapters. You can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically. And then after our questions, we'll go into studying chapters 41 through 45. It looks like Marcy has her hand up. Go ahead, Marcy.
Thank you, Teacher David. So the Buddha taught the different positions of meditation. Now my question is the important factor of the meditation is to make sure that the upper body is in a straight line. And the reason I ask this is because this body has a little bit of a faulty hip, and sometimes it's uncomfortable for me to sit up straight or lie down. And usually what I have to do is prop my body on my side with some pillows and stuff to keep that hip kind of in a straight line. But is it okay? I mean, I have been doing it. I have been meditating, like kind of laying on my side, but I keep my body kind of like in a straight line. Mm-hmm. So I'm, I can tell that the meditation, I don't feel I can get as deep into it, but I'm wondering if the Buddha taught just those positions because that's the most beneficial, or can you try to get as beneficial in another position?
Yeah, the four positions are kind of the four standard, seated, lying, standing, and walking. But then within those positions, there's various little tweaks that you can make to the body, because the body should be comfortable, not painful and not luxurious. That would be on either side. You would like to be in the middle. The part about upright body or erect body that the Buddha talks about, this is to keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. So in whatever position you take, as long as it's comfortable and the mind is attentive and alert, that's going to ensure that you can get the benefits out of meditation. But if the body was painful, or if it was luxurious, or the mind was experiencing that pain, or the body's so luxurious that it becomes complacent or inactive, you're not going to be getting any benefit. So when that body is comfortable and the mind is attentive and alert, that's where you'll be able to then train the mind to either eliminate those unwholesome qualities or arise wholesome qualities.
Okay. And Teacher David, I do have a second question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I've noticed that as the meditation practice is getting more solidified, I find that sometimes when I come out of meditation, especially if I just let myself come out of meditation, like I'm not on a time, like sometimes I have to time myself because of in between clients, but like if I just let myself meditate to the point where the body just comes out, my head, like I feel like I'm on a cloud. Like I feel like I got my head's going like this.
Like woo 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 woo.
Yeah. Yes.
This is normal. When you're training the mind, there's an effect to the brain. The physical structures of the brain start changing. Remember, the brain and the mind are two different things, but we can sense those changes, and doctors are even telling us about these changes now with MRIs, CAT scans, and other devices. So you can experience those sensations. That shows you that you're getting a lot of benefit when you're doing that. So those types of meditations is what you would like to be doing. And that's what's going to produce the most benefits for you. And eventually you'll get over that hump where you won't experience that anymore because all the changes to the brain have taken effect. The Buddha talked about training the mind. And once the mind gets to a certain point, that first stage of enlightenment and beyond, then the mind won't regress. Doctors are telling us the same thing about the brain, that when you get to a certain point in your meditation practice and the brain has made certain changes, they say that those changes never revert backwards again. And what you'll also notice is once all those changes take effect, you won't notice those sensations and everything. The head will just be very stable and steady. The mind will be very stable and steady. And you'll be over that hump. But whatever you're doing there to meditate and experience those things, not that you're looking for those experiences, but you're looking for that benefit that is being indicated by the sensation. So keep doing those types of things.
Yeah. Okay. And also, like, the other thing that I also experience is that when I find the mind is very focused on my breath and I can actually hear it, I get a very purplishly indigo. I see purple, like an indigo, purpley blue. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that's the same thing, right? That's just the mind just kind of clearing out the pollution and kind of resetting.
Yeah, the sight all happens inside the brain. The eyeball itself is just a lens that lets light in, and then the sight actually occurs inside the brain. So even with the eyes closed, you can still see things because the brain is what's producing the sight. So as those physical structures of the brain are changing, you can have all kinds of different colors or flashing lights or memories and different things. Your mind's very creative the way that it functions. And when that's occurring, just know that that's normal. Again, you'll get over that hump and eventually you won't see those colors and different things like that because all those changes will have taken place.
All right. Thank you, Teacher David.
Yes, you're welcome. All right, just going to look here and see if we have any questions on any of our other platforms. I'm not seeing any questions on any of our other platforms, so let's go ahead and move into studying the teachings of the Buddha using Volume 6, chapters 41 through 45. And for all of you in Zoom, if you would like to read at all, you're welcome to read. Just raise your hand and let me know that you'd like to volunteer. Otherwise, I'll just go ahead and read chapters, but I'd like to extend the offer out to everyone. Oh, I see Marcy raising her physical hand. You can go ahead and read, Marcy.
Chapter 41, the true definition of a being. Venerable Sir, it is said, a being. In what way, Venerable Sir, is one called a being? One is stuck, Radanda, tightly stuck, in desire, lust, excitement, and craving for form. Therefore, one is called a being. One is stuck, tightly stuck, in desire, lust, excitement, craving for feeling, for perception, for volitional formation, choices, decision, for consciousness. Therefore, one is called a being.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So this is helpful because the Buddha is providing you a definition of what is a living being. And if you remember back to the first precept, that the Buddha talks about living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So in order for you to accomplish that, you need to know what is a living being. And he's providing you a definition here. And remember, just like everything else in this practice, you're not believing anything. You're not believing these books. You're not believing me. You don't know where anything has been. You don't know what impermanence has affected it. So you're looking for the truth and getting to the truth. So you learn, you reflect through independent verification, and then you practice. So the learning here that you're getting from this particular book and what I'm sharing in the class is that the Buddha is describing what a living being is through the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and consciousness. These are the 5 things, or the 5 collections, or the 5 elements. And the Buddha is saying this is what describes a living being. I have them here in this chapter because remember, in each particular chapter, it's not only the words of the Buddha in the reference going back to the original source teachings, but you have words from me to help you further understand. So what form is this is the physical body. Then you've got feelings, which are the results of experiences in the mind through the 6 sense bases. This is those conditioned feelings of pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. So things like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, those are pleasant feelings. Then you've got painful feelings, which are anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and others, of course. And then you've got neither painful nor pleasant. And I put boredom and loneliness in there, but some people say that's quite painful for them. But shyness or displeasure or uncomfortableness, these are feelings. Then you've got perceptions. Perceptions is your belief or opinions of how things seem to be in the world, kind of your views or opinions, the way you look out at the world. Then you've got volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, certain choices that you make, certain decisions. This is your free will. Then you've got the consciousness itself, which is the mind. So consciousness is another way of saying the mind, right? So here, what you do to not believe this is, now that you've learned this, that a living being that the Buddha is describing is that it has form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness, these 5 collections or 5 elements or 5 aggregates. You take things that you know to be a living being, which is starting with yourself, or if you have animals or pets, dogs, cats, things like this, look at your own existence. Is there physical form? Are there physical structures? The answer is yes. Do you experience feelings? The answer is yes. Do you have certain perceptions, beliefs, opinions, and views about how things seem to be in the world? And those things may be true or false, but they're perceptions. Yes. Do you have volitional formations, choices and decisions? The answer is yes. Is there a consciousness or a mind? And the answer is yes. So now that you know how the Buddha is describing a living being through the 5 aggregates, and you can see that you have all 5 of these aggregates and that animals do as well, now you take something that's not a living being. You know that this electronic device that you're listening to me on is not a living being, or maybe a table or a chair that you might be sitting in. You know these aren't a living being. So now you reflect on this, and this is how you independently verify it. Does it have physical form? The answer is yes, it has physical form. Does it have feelings? No, this table, this chair, this computer doesn't have feelings. Does it have perceptions? No. Does it have volitional formations? No, it doesn't. It can't make any decisions by itself. Does it have a consciousness or a mind? The answer is no. So this is where you can come to the conclusion, and you can see, if you penetrate this deeply, you can see that the Buddha is indeed describing exactly what a living being is. And if you need to reflect on this more and compare it and contrast it to more things in the world that you know to be a living being and things that aren't a living being, then this will really help you. This is where you can look at things like a bacteria or a virus. You can see that it's not a living being because it may have physical form, a very minimal physical form, but it has physical form, but it doesn't have feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, or consciousness. This is where you can also look at plants. While we use the language where we oftentimes refer to a tree as being alive, It's not a living being based on the five aggregates. It has physical form, but it doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have perceptions. A tree doesn't look out at the world and have certain beliefs and opinions about the world. It doesn't have volitional formations. It can't make a choice or decision to pick itself up, walk down the street, and replant itself. And this is because it doesn't have a mind. So while we oftentimes use language in the unenlightened state in certain ways that it's not necessarily intended to be used, or that it doesn't necessarily represent true reality, your mind in your language needs to reflect true reality. So when we talk about plants or viruses, we talk about sometimes killing a tree or killing a virus. We're not actually killing it because it's not truly alive, because it's not truly a living being. So here is how you can see that through the words of the Buddha. He's providing you this definition that has stood the test of 2,500 years of changes and different impermanence that's happened in the world. He's teaching you the natural laws of existence that are timeless. They're not changing from the time of the lifetime of the Buddha until now. It's the same natural law. So a living being has form, feeling, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. Let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Oh, there's Marcy. What's your question, Marcy?
When he says tightly stuck in desire, lust, excitement, and craving for feeling, for perception, for visual formation, for consciousness, therefore one is called a being, when someone becomes enlightened, they're still a being. They're just an enlightened being, right? Which means that they would not be tightly stuck in these, or would they? Yeah, they wouldn't be tightly stuck in this because they wouldn't have desire, lust, excitement, craving, and all that, correct?
This is describing a being in the cycle of rebirth, where by the time you get to enlightenment, you've escaped the cycle of rebirth. Tightly stuck is like clinging. The mind is clinging and craving to form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're no longer clinging to those things. You're outside of that. So now someone might refer to that person as an enlightened being. They're still a living being, but they're not in the cycle of rebirth any longer in the way that the Buddha is describing here.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a good clarification. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here in any of our other platforms, so let's go on to the next chapter, which is 42. Let's see. So I guess I'll go ahead and read this one, unless, Marcy, did you sometimes volunteer to read all of them? Would you like to read all of them today? Okay.
Yeah, if you would like me to continue to read so that you can do the teaching, I'll mind it all.
Sure, go for it.
All right. The nutriment consciousness. The Venerable Malipangana said to the perfectly enlightened one, Venerable Sir, who consumes the nutriment consciousness? Not a valid question, the perfectly enlightened one replied. I do not say one consumes. If I should say one consumes, in that case, this would be a valid question. Venerable Sir, who consumes? But I do not speak thus. Since I do not speak thus, if one should ask me, Venerable Sir, for what is the nutriment consciousness a condition? This would be a valid question. To this, the valid answer is, the nutrient consciousness is a condition for the production of future renewed existence. When that which has come into being exists, the six sense bases come to be, with the six sense bases as a condition, contact. Venerable Sir, who makes contact? Not a valid question. The perfectly enlightened one replied, I do not say one makes contact. If I should say one makes contact, in that case, this would be a valid question. Venerable Sir, who makes contact? But I do not speak thus. Since I do not speak thus, if one should ask me, Venerable Sir, with what as condition does contact come to be? This would be a valid question. To this, the valid answer is, with the six sense bases as condition, contact comes to be. With contact as a condition, feeling. Venerable Sir, who feels? Not a valid question, the perfectly enlightened one replied. I do not say one feels. If I should say one feels, in the case, this would be a valid question. Venerable Sir, who feels? But I do not speak thus. Since I do not speak thus, if one should ask me, Venerable Sir, with what as condition does feeling come to be, this would be a valid question. To this, the valid answer, feeling comes to be is, with contact as condition, feelings comes to be. With feeling as condition, craving. Venerable Sir, who craves? Not a valid question, the perfectly enlightened one replied. I do not say one craves. If I should say one craves, in that case, this would be a valid question, Venerable Sir, who craves? But I do not speak thus. Since I do not speak thus, if one should ask me, Venerable Sir, with what as condition does craving come to be? This would be a valid question. To this, the valid answer is, with feeling as condition, craving comes to be. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of discontentedness. But, Phaguna, when the remainderless fade away, and elimination of the 6 sense bases for contact comes elimination of contact. With the elimination of contact, elimination of feeling. With the elimination of feeling, elimination of craving. With elimination of craving, elimination of clinging. With the elimination of clinging, the elimination of existence. With the elimination of existence, the elimination of birth. With the elimination of birth, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair is eliminated. Such is the elimination of the whole mass of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here we have a discourse where there's a student of the Buddha asking questions about dependent origination. We studied dependent origination back in volume 5, chapter 14. These are the 12 interlinking steps that shows how beings experience discontentedness through these 12 interlinking steps, and how one comes back into the world through the cycle of rebirth. When you first start out, you learn the Four Noble Truths, which gives you a little window into understanding craving, desire, attachment as the cause of discontentedness. But in reality, there's these 12 interlinking steps that one leads to the next that ultimately leads to discontentedness and rebirth. And what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're dismantling dependent origination, starting with the very first condition, which is ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. And you're working to transform that to wisdom. This is why the very first time when students start learning with me, I teach them not to believe any of the teachings that I share. Don't believe the books, don't believe anything, because belief, you don't know what's true or false. And if you just have belief, you can't get to wisdom. Thus, you can't transform ignorance into wisdom and dismantle dependent origination. So even though students don't learn dependent origination until they've maybe been learning with me for a year or two, I set them up at the very beginning to understand wisdom is what you're looking to cultivate. And ultimately, that's what's going to help you on this path to enlightenment, to transform the mind to this enlightened mental state. Well, here, this particular student is asking the questions to the Buddha about the dependent origination, but this individual doesn't understand the universal truth of non-self. They still have personal existence view where they think that there is an I or a me that is there, that is actually consuming or making contact or feeling. So when this student says, Venerable Sir, who consumes? Or Venerable Sir, who makes contact? The Buddha keeps saying this isn't a valid question because there is no I, there is no me, there's no you there. So if you understand the universal truth of non-self and how that's working to help you eliminate personal existence view, then you understand how the unenlightened mind clings to the self-image and the self-identity, thinking that there is an I or a me or a you. There is a physical body that's in existence. There is a mind that is in existence. And the combination of these two things we might refer to as a person or as a human being. But this self-image isn't you. It's not who you are as a person. And same thing with the self-identity. And when you come to realize this and you fully train your mind to let it go, then when your hair turns gray or you lose some hair or you get a pimple or a wrinkle or you get a little bit of fat here and there, you won't be all shaken up about it. Or if somebody says something agreeable or disagreeable to you, you won't be all shaken up and discontent about these things. You'll still make wise choices to take care of this physical body because you need to take care of it, but you won't experience discontentedness as a result. And then the same thing with the self-identity. There might be certain things that your mind is holding on to, like I am American, or I am a nurse, or I am a postal worker, or I am a construction worker, or I am a dad, or I am a mom, I am a machinist, or any of this I am. I am a husband, I'm a wife, I'm a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend. As long as the mind is identifying with that and thinking that's who you are, when you're not performing those roles anymore, you'll struggle. So if somebody went from, say, being a police officer and they got injured, and now say that they're an electrician, right? And say they're doing electrical work. Well, if they identified with I am a police officer, when they weren't able to work in that field of work anymore, they would really struggle because they identify with that's who they are as a person. That's their self-identity. And now they would really struggle. Or if you were a husband or a wife or a boyfriend or girlfriend and you guys separated, now you might try to hurry up and get right back into another relationship to try to assume that role again. So it's a matter of we perform certain roles in this world, we do certain things, but if the mind is clinging to it, thinking that's who you are, you'll experience discontentedness. But if you can get to a point where you don't identify with these things as who you are as a person, but you understand that you perform a certain role, you might have been a police officer for a period of time, but due to impermanence, that's now over. And now I need to go do this other thing. And that's how I'm going to sustain my life. But this identity of I am a police officer, that's just going to stand in the way of an individual experiencing peace and joy. Because now if somebody says something agreeable about police officers, then one will experience pleasant feelings. But if somebody says something disagreeable and degrading and diminishing, now someone will experience painful feelings. And this can happen based on someone's culture or ethnicity or sexual orientation or a certain job or occupation that you have, a certain role you fulfill in the world. This is the identity that the unenlightened mind is oftentimes clinging to. So you'd like to get rid of this self-image and self-identity, no longer clinging to it, thinking that this is who you are, and then when somebody says something either agreeable or disagreeable, you can continue to reside peaceful and joyful. So here the Buddha is just walking through dependent origination with this student and helping them understand that there isn't an I, there isn't a you, and kind of doing that in this particular way. And then this nutriment of consciousness, what this means is this is like what is fueling the consciousness to keep coming back into the world over and over and over again. So the Buddha describes the craving, desire, attachment as being the fuel that leads to rebirth. He describes this in other teachings. Here he's using this terminology of nutriment of consciousness. This is what's feeding the consciousness to allow it to continue. So as long as you have fuel in the mind, then the mind will continue. There'll be continuous existences. So the craving, anger, and ignorance, these are the fires that are burning in the mind. They're raging in the mind. And as long as a fire has fuel, like if there's logs on a fire, it will throw off sparks. And now those sparks, carried by the wind, will create a new fire. It's a brand new fire. So the same thing is if you have craving, desire, attachment, this longing, this yearning, this clinging and holding on to the world, then as long as that fuel, or as long as that fire is in the mind, then it's going to produce the next existence, because now the consciousness at the time of death, the body and the mind separate. The mind at the time of death still has craving, which still has that fuel, and now it produces a spark which creates the next consciousness. So the current consciousness will dissolve, but there'll be a new consciousness which has the craving and residual memories of the old consciousness. And this is just going to continue and continue and continue until an individual extinguishes all the craving, desire, attachment. There's no more fuel that produces the next consciousness. And part of doing that is to realize non-self, to eliminate personal existence view. And sometimes a teacher will talk this way, the way that the Buddha does, in order to kind of guide a student through and kind of see how they're asking questions, rather than the Buddha just coming out and saying, on the first question, oh, I'm sorry, there is no self. You asked a question that involves a self. Let me help you understand personal existence view. He's kind of walking through and seeing how far does the student keep looking for a self, keep trying to find a self. And ultimately, I imagine there was follow-up conversation here where the Buddha helped them to understand that there is no self. But here, sometimes a student can keep grasping and grasping and grasping and grasping. And that's one of the ways you can help them as a teacher to ultimately end their grasping, is to see how far and how long they will grasp. And then finally getting to the end of that, then ultimately helping the student to see what their mind is doing and what the true reality is, so that they can learn, reflect, and practice. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. You guys know how to do that through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions or follow-up questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's go ahead and move to the next chapter, which is chapter 43. All right, Marcy, up to you. Over to you.
The observation of existence. Venerable Sir, it is said, existence, existence. In what way, Venerable Sir, is there existence? 1. If, Ananda, there were no Kamma ripening for the sensory realm, would sensory spheres be observed? No, Venerable Sir. Thus, Ananda, for beings hindered by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and fettered by craving, Kamma is the field, consciousness the seed, and the craving the moisture for their consciousness to be established in an inferior realm, hell, animal, or afflicted spirit realms. In this way, there is the production of renewed existence in the future. If, Ananda, there were no Kamma ripening in the form realm, would form fear existence be observed? No, Venerable Sir. Thus, Ananda, for beings hindered by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and fettered by craving, Kamma is the field, consciousness the seed, the craving the moisture of the consciousness to be established in the middling realm, human realm. In this way, there is production of renewed existence in the future. 3. If, Ananda, there were no Kamma ripening in the formless realm, would formless sphere existence be observed? No, Venerable Sir. Thus, Ananda, for beings hindered by ignorance of unknowing of true reality and fettered by craving, Kamma is the field, consciousness the seed, and craving the moisture for their consciousness to be established in the upper realm, heavenly realm. In this way, there is production of renewed existence in the future. In this way, Ananda, there is existence.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here, the Buddha is describing the three things that are essentially helping to produce this new existence. He talks about craving as being the fuel that is essentially the trigger, that if at the time of death there's craving in the mind, that means there is going to be rebirth. But then your Kamma, basically the results of your decisions, that's what Kamma means, cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions, not a mystical, magical thing or black cloud or punishment and rewards, but just the results of your decisions. That's what's going to determine what realm one is born into and the condition of that existence once they get into that realm. And the seed here he's talking about is the consciousness. One of the things you're doing on this path to enlightenment is, of course, eliminating craving, desire, attachment. That's what's going to eliminate the discontent feelings, and that's what's going to eliminate rebirth as well. But you need wisdom in order to accomplish that. That's why you're transforming the mind away from ignorance to wisdom, so you understand how to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. Well, all unwholesome Kamma is being generated by craving, anger, and ignorance. These are the three poisons, or the three unwholesome roots. All Kamma that is unwholesome is going to be produced through making decisions that involve craving, anger, and ignorance. If you make decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, they're going to be unwise decisions and produce unwholesome results. And in addition to extinguishing craving, anger, and ignorance, what you're doing is you're extinguishing your unwholesome Kamma. any unwholesome Kamma production from the past. So that now that you're on this path, there's certain decisions that you made in the past that are going to come back to you. And now what you're looking to do is extinguish any unwholesome results of your decisions. So say prior to being on this path to enlightenment, you might have filled out some tax forms and you might have lied on those tax forms. Now you got onto the path to enlightenment and you're starting to learn about the 5 precepts and right speech and speaking truthfully and all these different things. And now say 3 years later, you get this notice from the government that you're going to be penalized because they found this lie on your tax forms. And now that you've gotten this, in the past where you might have tried to run and hide and be more deceptive, which would have just produced more unwholesome Kamma, instead you're choosing to do something different, which is be wise and make wise decisions to be truthful. And maybe you call up the government and you let them know that you take full responsibility for this and that you'd like to see if you can work out a payment plan in order to extinguish this unwholesome Kamma. And maybe even as a result, they drop off the penalty fees or something like that. So what you're doing is you're trying to extinguish this unwholesome Kamma. By the time you get to enlightenment, there is no more unwholesome Kamma. You've extinguished it all. If there's any unwholesome Kamma, then that means it's going to ripen. And that means that you're going to experience that in the next rebirth. So by extinguishing all your unwholesome Kamma in this life, then there is no further unwholesome Kamma to be experienced in a future life. So the way that you eliminate all your unwholesome Kamma is eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance from the mind, because that's what's producing all the unwholesome Kamma. And now if any unwholesome Kamma is coming back to you from the past, this is called old Kamma, you're now extinguishing it through making new decisions that produce new Kamma that are wise, so that now all your new Kamma is wholesome Kamma. And that's how you would ultimately extinguish all of this. So Kamma is the field that ensures that there's going to be a new consciousness in the future. The consciousness is the seed, and now the craving is providing the moisture for that to grow and grow and grow. And by training your mind in this life, you can get to peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy, and then escape the whole cycle of rebirth. By the time you get to enlightenment, your life will be very fulfilling. Everything will be at ease. Everything will be peaceful and joyful. You'll have everything well sorted out. There might be certain challenges here and there, but they're very minimal, and you'll be able to address it with wisdom pretty readily and just move on with your life. But you won't be experiencing any discontentedness at all. So life will be very fulfilling, very satisfying by the time your mind gets to enlightenment. But in the unenlightened state, we experience a certain amount of grief or misery or despair. And to choose to get on this path to enlightenment, not only are you escaping that misery and despair and that grief, but you're also escaping the cycle of rebirth. Because no matter how much we try to look at the positive side of life in the unenlightened state, there are certain griefs and miseries and despairs that are experienced. So you're moving away from all of that to get to the enlightened mental state, and it requires learning. As long as the mind still has things to learn in this world, in this cycle of rebirth, it's going to keep being reborn over and over and over and over again, because you haven't learned everything you need to learn in order to escape it. So by training your mind, transforming that ignorance into wisdom, you've learned everything you need to learn in this life. You've extinguished all your unwholesome Kamma. Essentially, there's no more debts, right? And now you can move on, and the rest of this life, you're going to experience the peace and joy. And then at the end of this life, you won't be coming back to experience any kind of rebirth or grief or misery or despair. That's all ended in this life. And you can enjoy that mental state for the rest of this life and know that you're not going to be coming back to experience it over and over and over again, ever again, because that's what we've all been doing countless times in the past. And now in this human realm, it's your opportunity to get out of that and escape all of that. It's the ideal existence to be able to accomplish that goal. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? All right, it looks like we have some questions coming in here on YouTube. Is rebirth based on unwholesome and wholesome deeds, or more on the final mind condition? I heard that, for example, if our final mind before death experiences angriness, that person would be reborn in hell. So the question is rebirth based on deeds and actions, wholesome and unwholesome, or more on the condition of the mind? So there's no being that is looking over the course of your life and trying to decide whether you're wholesome or unwholesome and what realm you should be born into. There's no universe, there's no entity, there's nothing that's doing that. Instead, it's all about the condition of the mind at the time of death. This is the cause and effect, or the action and result of how beings move from one realm to the other or within a certain existence. Because at the time of death, the condition of your mind is based on everything you've done in your entire life. So let's just say throughout your entire life, you've been very murderous and you've been killing and killing and killing and killing repeatedly. That means there's a certain amount of anger, hatred, and ill will in your mind. And if you die with that, then that's going to be part of what determines whether you move to what particular realm or rebirth or what have you. So it's not a being that's overlooking your life or any entity trying to judge you, but the condition of your mind at the time of death is based on this cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, all the way up until your death. And now certain cravings, certain anger, certain ignorance that's in the mind, this is going to produce the next result of what happens next after this in terms of whether you are going to be reborn and what realm and what condition. But if you get to enlightenment, by the time you get to death, now there's no longer any unwholesome qualities in your mind whatsoever. You fully cultivated the mind. You fully purified the mind. So at the time of death, your mind's already been purified. So there aren't any causes or conditions that are going to lead to the next rebirth. So the Buddha doesn't describe what comes next for an enlightened being, but he explains that there's no more rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. But he doesn't say whether there is an existence or isn't existence, what may or may not come next. But we know there isn't rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. But it's all based on the condition of the mind at the time of death, because that's what sends the next thing into motion, so to speak, if the mind is unenlightened. So great question there, Vladimir. I'm not seeing any questions in Facebook or Zoom. So let's go on to the next chapter, chapter 44.
The conduit to existence. Venerable Sir, it is said, the conduit to existence, the conduit to existence. What, Venerable Sir, is the conduit to existence? And what is the elimination of the conduit to existence? Radanda, the craving, desire, excitement, lust, engagement, and clinging, mental standpoints, adherence, an underlying tendency regarding form. This is called the conduit to existence. Their elimination is the elimination of the conduit to existence. The craving, desire, excitement, lust, engagement, and clinging, mental standpoints, adherence, and underlying tendencies regarding feeling. This is called the conduit to existence. Their elimination is the elimination of conduit to existence. The craving, desire, excitement, lust, engagement, and clinging, mental standpoints, adherence, and underlying tendency regarding perception. This is called the conduit to existence. Their elimination is the elimination of the conduit to existence. The craving, desire, excitement, lust, engagement, and clinging, mental standpoints, adherence, and underlying tendencies regarding volitional formation, choices, and decisions. This is called the conduit to existence. Their elimination is the elimination of conduit to existence. The craving, desire, excitement, lust, engagement, and clinging, mental standpoints, adherence, and underlying tendencies regarding consciousness. This is called the conduit to existence. Their elimination is the elimination of the conduit to existence.
All right. Thank you, Marcy. So before we were talking about the nutriment of consciousness, that it's craving, desire, attachment that provides the nutriment that allows the consciousness to continue. Without that craving, desire, attachment, the mind wouldn't be able to continue for continuous rebirths or continuously new existences. Well, what a conduit is what allows this to transpire. What is, a conduit is like if you have an electrical circuit, what allows the electricity to move from one point to another point? Well, the wire between those points is the conduit. That's what allows the electricity to travel from one location to another. So here, what the Buddha is describing is that the five aggregates are the conduit to existence. This is what allows the mind to essentially come into the world and continue to exist. So form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. It's the craving, the clinging, the holding on to these. So in the unenlightened state, one might cling to the physical form. And now when there's changes in impermanence, you might be either experiencing excitement, which is pleasant feelings, or you might be experiencing sadness, which is painful feelings. Same thing with the feelings. Certain feelings that are in the mind, an individual might cling or hold on to these. And then the perceptions, the volitional formations, and the consciousness itself. As long as the mind is clinging to these five aggregates, therefore desiring existence in this realm or in any other realm, then this is the conduit. This is allowing the existence to continue on and on and on and on and on. So this is why you're working on eliminating all cravings, not just craving for this object or that object, but also eliminating craving and clinging to this being who you are now. Again, we take care of this physical body, we take care of the mind, but not clinging to it as this is who you are as a person. Therefore, if you cling to it, you're not only going to experience discontentedness in this life, but then there'll be continuous rebirth as well. And this is the Kamma. This is why it's included in this particular book, because it's cause and effect, or action and result. The Buddha is showing you the natural law of Kamma, of what leads from one thing to the next. He's showing you the cause and effect, or the action and result, the results of your decisions. If you choose to continue to crave and cling to these five aggregates, then the result is continuous existence. And you can see that in dependent origination, but here he's describing it in a bit different way as it relates to the five aggregates. Any questions here on this particular chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's go to our last chapter, just a very short class today, which is 5 chapters. Go ahead, Marcy, if you'd like to read this one.
Yes, Teacher David. Dependent origination as the highest law of nature. Monks, I will teach you dependent origination and dependently arisen phenomenon things. Listen and attend closely, I will speak. And what, monks, is dependent origination? 1. With birth as condition, aging and death come to be, whether there is an arising of a Tathagatas or no arising of a Tathagatas. The elements still persist. The stableness of the teachings, the fixed course of the teachings, specific conditionality. A Tathagata awakens to this and breaks through to it. Having done so, he explains it, teaches it, proclaims it, establishes it, discloses it, analyzes it, illuminates it. And he says, see, with birth as condition, monks, aging and death. With existence as condition, birth. With clinging as condition, existence. With craving as conditions, clinging. With feeling as condition, craving. With contact as condition, feeling. With the 6 sense bases as condition, contact. With name and form as condition, the 6 sense bases. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With volitional formations, choices, decisions as condition, consciousness. With ignorance, unknowing of true reality as condition, volitional formations, choices, decision, whether there is an arising of a Tathagatas or no arising of a Tathagatas, the elements still persist. The stableness of the teachings, the fixed courses of the teachings, specific conditionality. A Tathagata awakens to this and breaks through to it. Having done so, he explains it, teaches it, proclaims it, establishes it, discloses it, analyzes, illuminates it. And he says, see, with ignorance, unknowing of true reality as condition, monks, volitional formation, choices, decisions. Thus, monks, the reality is this: the lack of error, the consciousness, specific conditionality. This is called dependent origination.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So, as I mentioned, we learned dependent origination back in Volume 5, Chapter 14, and that's where we went through and taught it very detailed. This upcoming retreat that I'm teaching here in Chiang Mai starting tomorrow, and by the way, I'm going to try to live stream all the classes from that retreat, so you'll be able to watch them as recordings or watch them live if you like, and even ask questions during the retreat. There's going to be a certain number of people here live, and then there's going to be people online as well. So I'm going to probably spend a good hour and a half just teaching dependent origination, among other aspects of that retreat, where that retreat is geared towards developing a life practice to attain the first stage of enlightenment. It's going to be all the teachings in one retreat that are needed to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So here the Buddha is describing dependent origination, but he's adding something to it that he doesn't normally add when we studied it in Volume 5, Chapter 14. Here he's describing that whether a Buddha arises or not, that this dependent origination, this natural law, this highest law of nature, it's going to happen regardless. So a Buddha awakens to dependent origination. They see the truth in it, they understand it, they can explain it, they can talk about it, they know it to be true 100% with 100% certainty. But what the Buddha is describing is whether he awoke to enlightenment as a Buddha or any other Buddhas that awake, this natural law is going to be functioning regardless, that it's going to be functioning all the time. This is what causes discontentedness, and this is what causes rebirth. So once a Buddha awakens to it, they break through to this particular teaching and they can see it very clearly. And having seen it, then they start explaining it, teaching it, proclaiming it, establishing it, disclose it to others, analyze it and illuminate it so that other people can see it too, because it's not something that somebody would just think up themselves other than an actual Buddha. A Buddha can see this natural laws of the natural law of Kamma, dependent origination, and all these other natural laws of existence. They can see them very clearly, and then they spend the rest of their life helping other people see it, and then they encourage them to investigate it and examine it so they can reflect on it, to independently verify it, and then practice and see the truth for yourself. So a Buddha having broken through to dependent origination, knowing the 12 interlinking steps that leads to discontentedness and leads to rebirth, now they're going to illuminate that for as many beings as possible to be able to then see it, so that then when you understand dependent origination and you dismantle it, now by dismantling dependent origination, you can experience enlightenment. That's what you're doing on this path. Everything else that you learn up to dependent origination is helping you to build your wisdom so that you will ultimately learn dependent origination. You don't just start with learning dependent origination. It's very rare that I would say somebody would actually do that. You start with the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths and the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts. You learn meditation and you practice these things, but ultimately you get to a point where you start learning about dependent origination and you see those 12 interlinking steps. And the more you penetrate it, the more you can see the truth. And now you dismantle it. And you dismantle it by that top line of ignorance. Here the Buddha is describing dependent origination from the bottom up rather than the top down. Normally he describes it top down, but there's some places where he describes it bottom up. Well, from the top down, you understand that the very top line is that ignorance, and that's why you're working to gain wisdom. And you never, ever, ever believe any of the teachings, because that's not going to get you to wisdom. So then he's just going through and talking about dependent origination and then summing it up with helping us to understand that whether a Tathagata awakes to enlightenment or not, this dependent origination is going to be functioning. And then he says, thus, monks, the reality in this, the lack of error, the conciseness, specific conditionality, this is called dependent origination, because he knows that he's discovered the truth. It's very concise, it's without error, and if you penetrate it, you can see the truth of what's causing discontentedness and what's causing rebirth. And now as you dismantle dependent origination through acquiring wisdom and eliminating craving, desire, attachment, then you see your anger is eliminated and all your other discontent feelings. So while we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, it's really because of ignorance that craving and anger continues to exist and continues to persist. But with the conciseness and the preciseness and lack of error of dependent origination, when you understand the problem, then you can take action to fix it. But unless you understand the problem, you can't fix it. So that's what a Buddha is doing, is he's explaining to you what the true problem is in the unenlightened mind, and then providing you the tools and techniques of how to fix it and how to dismantle it. And having done so, you see the truth for yourself that the condition of the mind is gradually improving, ultimately experiencing the peace and joy of the enlightened mind. So let me know what questions you guys have on this one. All right, I'm not seeing any questions here anywhere. So what I'll do then is I will just thank all of you guys for joining for today's class and remind you that next class we're going to be in Volume 7, chapters 1 through 10. So if you'd like to read those beforehand, because you have the words of the Buddha, the reference, and you have the words from me to be able to help you further explore it, that will really help you. So as you come to class, remember, this is just a study group. This is an opportunity for you to gain insight based on your previous study, because those chapters, I can't go through all the level of detail that I wrote about in some of these chapters, because some of these chapters I've written maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of things to explain maybe 3 paragraphs from the Buddha. Even though the Buddha speaks very precise and very concise, there's sometimes other information that you need in order to be able to understand those 3 paragraphs that he talked about. So by you studying ahead of time, as you come to class like this, you'll be able to then ask questions, because I'm not going to be able to go into the same level of detail in the class as I do in the book. So feel free to explore those by going to buddhadailywisdom.com, downloading them for free, taking it and go printing it, or ordering it on Amazon, which you can access from pretty much most places of the world. And then, as I mentioned, we have various opportunities for continued learning. Tomorrow, in the group learning program, there's going to be the beginning of the 3-part series to understand the Eightfold Path. So I'm going to be going into that in detail. And over the course of 3 classes, I'm going to be penetrating into the path to enlightenment through the wisdom section, moral conduct section, and the mental discipline section, using the words of the Buddha so that you can fully inform your practice. And then also tomorrow at 3 p.m. Thai time, I'm going to be starting a retreat here. And I imagine for some parts of the world, that's going to be way too early for you to maybe be waking up and attending live. But remember, it'll be recorded on YouTube and on Facebook, so you'll be able to then digest the content there. We're going to be having sessions in the morning starting at 9 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. here. Then we're going to go out for 6 hours and do various activities. And then there's another session from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And then on the various Sunday and Wednesdays, I'm still going to be teaching all of our normal programs of the online Pali Canon and English study group and the group learning program. So if you're attending these, you'll have these to learn from. But if you would like to dive into additional teachings that are just for the first stage of enlightenment, you might be interested in those retreat sessions, which are all loaded on Facebook and YouTube now. You should be able to see the playlist, and you'll see what time they're happening. And you can even go to the link of the retreat and you can see the full detail of each class and a description of each class, so that then if you would like to attend live for any of the classes, you can, or you can just digest the content through YouTube or Facebook and then ask your questions through posting in Facebook, through asking questions through private message, or perhaps scheduling personal guidance. And then there's questions you can ask in some of these classes as well. As we teach classes, you're always welcome to ask questions. But since that content is unique to that particular retreat, you may not be able to ask in these particular classes. So find a place where you can ask the questions either in Facebook, through sending a private message, or scheduling personal guidance. And then where we have time, we can always take an occasional question that's not necessarily on the particular topic we're discussing. So these are all learning opportunities for you to be able to learn. And then about a week from now, I'm going to be teaching a class called Experiencing the Jhanas in the 4 Stages of Enlightenment. This is another course or retreat here in Chiang Mai, which I'm going to be starting to live stream all the classes and courses and retreats that I teach at the temple. So even this Pali Canon and English study group, which I taught this morning at 9 a.m., I'm going to start live streaming that in the group learning program. So now there's going to be 2 options. You can be attending like you do here normally, or you can be attending the earlier class. So for those of you guys on the East Coast of the USA, you'll have a Friday evening, Saturday evening, and Tuesday evening availability for class now, where now you have Sunday morning, Wednesday morning, and Saturday morning. So there's going to be 2 options now for the Pali Canon and English study group and the group learning program, as well as all the other courses and retreats that we're going to be live streaming out of the temple. So you guys can tune into these things and decide, what makes sense for you to be able to learn, because you're on your own independent journey and there's all these new options available to you that you can partake in. So thank you all for your continued support to allow me to offer these types of things, to be able to set up the equipment, to be able to offer the live streaming directly from the temple, and all the other things that I'm doing to bring you these teachings more and more. This is your Kamma coming back to you. As you're practicing generosity, the Kamma is coming back to you, where you're getting more and more opportunities to be able to learn. So thank you guys for all your support. Thank you for your questions. I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.